Welcome to 321 exams. Today we're looking at the use of English, and our topic for today is the subjunctive. Very interesting topic for the JAMB student. Now, the subjunctive, we'll be looking at the meaning of the subjunctive, the forms of the subjunctive, the rules that governs the subjunctive, exceptions to the rules of the subjunctives. We'll pick up a concluding statement about they will also look at various examples. So these are the things we'll be looking at under this particular topic, the subjunctive. So first, let's start with the meaning of the subjunctive. What exactly do we refer to as a subjunctive? In most cases, I said the subjunctive is just a form of a verb that is often used to express wishes, conditions, or imagined situations. But let's see. I said the subjunctive is the form of a verb that is often used to express wishes, uncertainty, possibility, condition, or imagined situation. Now, the subjunctive forms include: number one, I wish. Number two, I would rather. Number three, it's time, or it's high time. Number four, as if. Number five, if only. Number six, supposing. Now, these are the various forms of the subjunctive. What exactly do we define subjunctive as? We said the subjunctive is just the form of a verb that is often used to express wishes, conditions, uncertainty, or imagined situations. Now, what are the various forms of the subjunctive? I said I have I wish, I would rather, it's time or it's high time, as if only, suppose, or supposing. Now, these are the various forms of subjunctive. Now, once you see any of these being the subject of a sentence, it means that the examiner is asking that question on the forms of subjunctive. Now, let's move ahead. Now, when any of these subjunctive forms is used, subjunctive form is used as the subject of a sentence, when any of these subjunctive forms is used as the subject of a sentence, the time being referred to must first be ascertained. The time being referred to must first be ascertained because it is the time that determines the tense of the verb to be used. It is the time that determines the tense of the verb to be used. Now, if the sentence refers to an action in the present, the tense of the verb will be in the past tense. And if it refers to an action in the future, the tense of the verb will be in the past tense. And if it refers to an action in the past, the tense of the verb will be in the past perfect tense or the past participle. Now, look up. What exactly are we saying? We said once the examiner uses any of these subjunctive forms, the intended intention of the examiner is for you as the examinee to determine the correct tense of the verb. And naturally, you know that the tense of the verb is in three categories. You have a verb in the present tense, you have a verb in the past tense, you also have a verb in the past participle. Now, I said that for you to determine the tense of the verb, the time of the action must first be ascertained. Why is it that you have to determine the time of the action? Because it is the time of the action that determines the tense of the verb. Once you do not have the ability of determining the time of the action, it will be difficult for you to determine the tense of the verb. What the examiner will do in the right sense of the word is to give you a question using the subjunctive forms and give you options in the verb classes of tenses and expect you to choose the right tense to be used. So which means that your first duty is to identify that this question is from the subjunctive by looking at the subjunctive forms. I gave you 6 subjunctive forms. Once you see any of these subjunctive forms, what do? You should know that the examiner will use these subjunctive forms as the subject of the sentence in most cases and expect you to put the right tense of the verb in or use it to fill the gap. So what do you do in that regard? I said it is the time of the action that is your first duty. Once you are able to identify or determine the time of the action, then we can now determine the tense of the verb. So we said that we have an action which is a present action, and the present action goes with what? The past tense verb. The past tense what? Verb. We also have an action in the future. I call it a future action. A future action also goes with what? The past tense verb. We also have an action in the past, which I call the past action. And past action goes with what? The past participle. The past participle. Now you now ask yourself a very simple question. What is the difference between a verb in the past tense and also a verb in the past participle? Let me make that clear. You will discover that it is the time of occurrence that makes it different. Now, which means that naturally, if something should happen this morning, it's a past tense, isn't it? It's a past. If something should happen yesterday, it's also past. If something should happen last week, it's also past. If something should happen 5 years ago, it's also past. Something happens about 10 to 12 years ago, it's also past. But the time of occurrence makes it different. So which means that if you are to use a verb in the past tense, you do not need a helping verb. But if you are to use a verb in the past participle, you need an helping verb. So the first point is what differentiates between a tense A verb in the past tense and a verb in the past participle is their time of occurrence. And apart from their time of occurrence being a major difference, another major difference is that if you are to use a verb in the past tense, you don't need an helping verb. But if you are to use a verb in the past participle, you actually need an helping verb. Now let me teach you the JAMB student and elimination method. When you see a question in this regard, what do? The first point you have noted is that what? There is no verb in the present tense that can be used to fill any of the subjunctive forms. Or there is no verb in the present tense that can follow the subjunctive forms. So which means that if I see a question and I see an option, the first option I'm to eliminate, if I'm to use the elimination method, is to eliminate that verb in the present tense. Reason being that the tense of the verb that can be used can only be a verb in the past tense and also a verb in the word past participle. So in that regard, I don't have anything to do with a verb in the present tense when it comes to these subjunctive forms. Now let's move ahead. So which means that what? It is the time of the action that must first be what? Ascertained. You ascertain the time of the action because it helps in determining the tense of the verb to be used. Now let's take some few questions. Before then, take note, I said present action goes with past tense. Future action goes with past tense, and past action goes with past participle. So in that regard, let's see, this is a summary of the rule. This is a summary of the rule. This rule summarizes everything we are to look at under the subjunctive. Now let's take the first question. JAMB 1995, question 84. It's time the room dash redecorated, it looks awful. It's time the room dash redecorated, it looks awful. It's time the room dash redecorated, it looks awful. Now look at this now. The first point is, what time of this action is this? This is a present action. This is what? A present action. And what does a present action goes with? A present action also goes with what? A past tense verb. So I'll look at this now. I have has, is. These aren't past. This is present. This is present. This is present. So it's time the room dash redecorated, it looks awful. It's time the room was redecorated, it looks awful. So the answer here is what? Option A. It's time the room was redecorated, it looks awful. Number 2. I wish I dash your age. I wish I dash your age. Now, I wish I dash your age here. This action is what? A present action. What does a present action goes with? It goes with what? A past tense verb. A present action goes with what? A past tense verb. So I wish I dash your age. I wish I wear your age. Wear here is what? Past tense. I wish I wear your age. Now, I wish I dashed to swim when I was younger. Now, in this regard, what time of the action? Look at the pointer here, was. So this is what? A past action. What does past action goes with? It goes with the past perfect tense or the past participle. That's what it goes with. So I wish I dashed to swim when I was younger. So your first point is to identify the pointer that determines if an action is in the present or an action is in the past. Because your inability of identifying the pointer might give you a wrong clue towards identifying the certainty of the answer to the question. So the first thing you need to do is to identify the pointer. And the pointer here is what? Was. This was shows that this action is not in the present. This action is not in the future, but this action is in the what? Past. And once we have the past tense or the past action goes with what? The past participle. And I said, if you are to use a verb in the past participle, what do? You naturally need an helping verb. So here, I wish I dashed to swim when I was younger. I wish I had learned to swim when I was younger. Learn is present and is wrong. Learned is past and is wrong. Has learned is also wrong.